Welcome back. So today we'll be looking at understanding a pattern and how to select the correct size. For me, I've always drafted my patterns using my body measurement, but recently I gained a significant amount of weight and I'm having difficulty just, drafting a pattern for myself. So I decided that I wanted to just use simple store-bought patterns to get back into the groove of just sewing a garment for myself. But the first thing I realized is that I do not know what sizes to cut because it's quite difficult for me to understand the sizing on these patterns. So the first thing I would suggest if you're having this difficulty is to take your body measurements, right? So when I take my body measurements, I was taught by my mom to do the measurements separately. So I'd have my overall bust measurement, but then I would also take the front measurement and the back measurement, and I do it for all the different areas. So it's important to do your shoulder, your bust, your waist, your hip, and your shoulder to waist. Now that we've had this measurement, how do we transfer them to a store-bought pattern? The next thing I'll suggest is to, go in your closet. Do you have any clothes that you bought at the store? So now I know that I am a size large, extra large, and based on the different size chart that I would have looked up, it would be anywhere between a 16 and a 14 or an 18, depending on, the different variations in brand. I can use that information now to further guide how I select a size on the pattern. Now, if you look on the body measurements and the sizes, you will realize that based on my measurements, I would be a size 22. So on my measurement chart, you would have seen that I have like a 44, 36, 45. And on this, it is matching up to a size 22. But we already determined from just looking at store-bought clothes, trying them on, and seeing what sizes are in the tags that I normally purchase, it would be shown that I am a size 16. So I have to use that information to guide me. Otherwise, I would have cut out a size 22, and that would have been significantly too large for me. So based on the information from store-bought clothes, I would be looking at a size 16. Now, there's something to note that on the front of your pattern, so when you open your pattern, there is a finished garment measurement. So it tells you that a size 16, when you're finished sewing it, with all the ease that is accounted, that the bust will be 43 and a half. The waist will be 36 and a half. It also tells you that the hip measurements will finish at 46 inches, and that's inclusive of your ease. Now, looking at that information, just to see that the finished garment would have a bust of 43 and a half, waist of 36 and a half, and a hip of 46, I'm realizing that I probably either need to modify the pattern to accommodate my bust, or I could choose the size up, which is a size 18, which naturally would fit my bust, and then adjust the other areas, waist and hip, to fit my body type. But when I was selecting this pattern, I did not understand all this information. So you see my pattern stops at a size 16. When adjusting a pattern, I realized that it's best to select a size where the bust of the finished garment actually fits your bust, and then you can adjust the other areas accordingly. Or if you're making bottoms, it is best to select a size where the hips of the finished garment fit your hip, and then you can adjust the other size, because to adjust a bust or the hip is a lot trickier or more technical than just simply taking in the waist of a garment to make it smaller. to recap, so when we're going to buy our patterns online, we are going to go into our closet, see what sizes clothes we have, store-bought clothes that fit us, and then based on the size that we have, we're going to select the pattern around that. So as I said, I looked in my closet and I realized that I have shirts that are 16, I have shirts that are 14, I have clothes that have, whether it's t-shirt or anything, skirts, I see large, I see extra large in the clothes, in the tags. So when I'm going to choose a pattern, I'm going to choose a pattern that runs from the mid-size range. So I'm going to choose anywhere from a 14, 16, 18 to purchase. Some of these patterns, when you're looking at them, they come in 2 sizes. So you'll have size, this one has a smaller size, so 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. And then you'll have the option to choose another set of patterns that have 18, 20, 22, thereabout. Right? For me, I can work with a 16 and simply just adjust the areas that needs adjusting. So how do you go about cutting out your pattern? First, we selected the size, and on the pattern you'll see that they have different styles of line for each of the sizes. So I'm going to cut a 16 because we determined that a 16 would be the most appropriate size for me. Now, I suggest that you do not cut this original shirt pattern, right? Unless you're in the position where you can purchase new patterns if needed. But what I prefer to do is to just trace the pattern onto another sheet of paper. So I'm using, grease paper. So I went into the supermarket and I bought some, you call it either grease or parchment paper, because it has a similar texture, in my opinion, to this. Of course, you can always order tracing paper online, but hey, I live in Jamaica and this is in my supermarket. The next thing you can get is what we call in Jamaica carbon. You can get it at any bookstore or pharmacy. So I bought mine in the pharmacy, such as Fontana. So how a carbon works is when you write on it, say I'm writing, it gets transferred to the paper beneath it. So there are 2 ways you can trace your pattern. You can use the method, since this is grease paper and it's pretty thin, in my opinion, you can lay it on top of the pattern piece and simply use your pencil to trace the line. It might not show up on camera, but in person I can see it a lot better. It would be even better if you had tracing paper, since it's a lot more translucent, or you can use your carbon. So what I've done is to place underneath the paper, the pattern, I've placed the grease paper, then I place the carbon paper on top, and then the pattern. So now I can simply take a pencil. I use one that doesn't have a point because I would not want to tear my pattern. And I'm just using this pocket here. You can just use your pencil or tracing wheel to mark along the lines on top of the pattern, and it will transfer to the grease paper underneath. And why I'm using a pencil that doesn't have a point is because I do not want to mark my pattern. So I would just get a ruler and put alongside here and then just mark along this line, since for me it's a straight line. And another thing to note when you're making patterns is it might get a little tedious just tracing out all the different pattern pieces. So for example, for myself, this is just a square pocket, right? It's pretty easy for me to just measure the dimensions and transfer it to my pattern. So I can see that this is it's a square. It's a 5.5 inch square by 7 inches, and it has a 1.25 inch fold. So I would not trace this pattern piece if I was making this pattern. I would simply just put the measurements on the fabric and cut it out. So I went ahead and I traced out the pattern piece, which here I believe is the pocket. I transferred the number and all the markings that I saw on it. So that's the grain lines, and these are the lines I made with my pencil that doesn't have a point. And then this line to the side, I use my tracing wheel just to show you what a tracing wheel line would look like. But you have to be careful when using the tracing wheel, because you don't want to tear your original pattern, because you want to maintain the pattern. So if you happen to, go on your exercise journey and you lose some weight, then you can use the same pattern to cut a smaller size instead of you repurchasing the pattern each time you gain or lose weight. It's best to just trace it. So after tracing the pattern now, if you had any adjustments to make, you can make them on your pattern.